Hey, welcome to Guitar Knobs, the guitars, gear, noise, and nonsense podcast, hosted today by these knobs.
Tony Dudzik, Pick Guardian.
Jared Brandon Wound pickups.
Mike Trombley, Native Audio.
What?
The boys are back.
Mike is in the house.
The band is back together.
That's right. Mike Trombley. Hey, this is Todd Novak. We are super thrilled that you are with us on our show today, the Guitar Knobs podcast. Yes. Hey, real quick, Tony Maloney, what do we do on the show?
We talk about pizza.
Perfect. What else?
And boutique pedals,
And boutique pedals,
amps, and guitars.
amps, and guitars. Thank you, Mike. You're just feeding me the words.
Okay.
Professional.
We have
Awesome.
good one-on-ones once in a while, too.
Yeah, we do. But we like to talk to the smaller builders usually, although we've talked to a couple of larger ones.
Yep.
It's we like to talk, get kind of the background, how you got started. Well, what do you see coming up?
Yeah, all the things.
All
Thanks.
the things. And you talk about
Try
that
to keep
stuff.
up with the times.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and mostly we talk about gear
Yep.
and sometimes pizza.
It's
Very
all good.
rarely.
Man. It's all good.
Speaking of boutique builders of fame and fortune, or at least repeat offenders on the show, who's on the line right now?
Zach Broyles from Mythos Pedals.
All right, Zach,
Mythos.
making a three-peat.
I'm back.
Mjolnir.
I like it.
Mjolnir.
Yes. So just a little setup for the show, everybody. Zach and I had a phone conversation a couple weeks ago, and he had an idea where he wanted to send us dueling golden fleece pedals. One was surface mount, and one was through hole. And the only rule was like, don't cheat and peek and see which one is which, but they were designated by a different knob color. As we started to talk a little bit more, we thought about doing a show based on like what's going on in the pedal world right now. What are some things that Zach as a pedal builder and Mike as a pedal builder are encountering from, just how they're building pedals, what the requests that they're getting, things that they're seeing, trends, what are the actual pedal builders talking about with each other.
Are they talking?
Yes, they're talking for sure. So that was a really interesting thing. So we was like, yeah, let's do a show about that and just sort of let the rest of us in on maybe the deeper pedal world. Lots of questions to be had. So we'll be asking lots of nice questions. And this one may go a little long. It may have to break it into two. Maybe not. We'll see.
We'll see. So are we going to start talking about the golden fleece?
Nope. We're going to
fleeces?
cover a couple things real quick.
Dang it.
We got a couple of announcements real quick. We want to give a big fat shout out to Rode Microphones for providing our Rodecaster Pro recording unit, which is fascinating and awesome and amazing, and we love it, and we are so grateful to them for supplying that, as well as our Procaster mics, which are still treating us extremely well, articulating arms and everything.
I love the articulating arms.
Yes,
Really
sir.
nice.
Massive thanks to Rode for their support. Check them out at Rode Mics. They're out of Australia.
They are.
Neat. And that's it. That's the announcements. We just got too much to talk about today. We're going to do a real quick what's going on in our music world this week. Let's start with Mike.
All right, so I brought in here, this is the Ibanez SB7. It's a synthesizer bass, but I run it with my guitar. A guy in my hometown actually gave this to me and was wanting me to kind of do something similar to this or take the concept of this and do it. It has Ottawa synth 1, synth 2, and it has a decay, slow and fast, but it's your typical like envelope filter settings. And to be honest, the synth 1 and synth 2, I don't know, they don't really jive with me, but the Ottawa on it sounds pretty killer. And the controls that it comes with are pretty nice to dial something in sweet. So I've been rocking that for the past couple weeks, playing around with that.
Nice.
Yeah.
I wish there was a pedal company that only made Ottawas that were located in Ottawa.
Ottawa. That'd be pretty killer.
Tony, what's going on?
Lots of stuff's going on. I did some postings on Instagram of some Vox things. I had a gentleman. This guy, God bless him. He's got more old Voxes and things than I've ever seen, and he sent a bunch of bodies up because that's really the only way to make them because the guards just shrink.
Interesting.
This one was like bubbled and shrunk and stinky and all that stuff. But
and specifically, you're talking about the Vox guitars.
Vox, like the Phantom guitars,
Yeah, the Phantoms,
the teardrops aren't so bad. But I did find something rather interesting. So at the shop, we usually have a Spotify kind of artist of the day series.
Yeah, that's cool.
And so I've always liked the song El Paso by Marty Robbins.
Down in the West Texas town of El Paso.
So that's the song. Only it's much better when Marty sings
Yeah.
it. But anyhow, as it was going through, this one song pops up that I eventually did a little research on, and it's like this distorted guitar sound coming through. Now, this is on a song that was recorded in like 1960 and came out in 1961. It's called "Don't Worry." And so I dug through a little bit on Wikipedia and some other sources. And the guitar player, the session guy, was Grady Martin, who a lot of people might know because he was a famous guy back in the 50s and 60s.
Of course, a guy, that grew up back then is called Grady Martin.
Grady Martin, but who also played a Bigsby guitar, a double neck Bigsby guitar. But apparently there was a bad channel on the mixing board, and so he was doing this thing on a tic tac bass, a 6-string bass, and it sounds like the guitar tone in Satisfaction.
Really?
Only 4 years earlier, 5 years earlier.
Oh.
And so and Grady Martin apparently wanted him to scrap it, but the producer of the record wanted to keep it in. So it's one of the earliest recordings of a distorted guitar signal. So that's Marty Robbins, Don't Worry.
Oh, check that out.
Check it out.
Fascinating. Zach, how about yourself?
Well, we just moved to a new house and been trying desperately to get everything set up because I haven't turned the websites off, so I've been getting lots of orders. But what I'm trying to do right now is set up a video room because I want to dive in and do more YouTube stuff, pedal demos and things like that. And so that's kind of been my focus for the past week or so. I finally got my shop in order and trying to get NAMM ready too. But I really want to do more YouTube stuff because I feel like I'm fairly good at it. And so that's been consuming me lately, trying to get prepped for that.
Awesome. Jared.
So, all of us in this room were at the last guitar show in Columbus. Mm-hmm. And it was a good show. And we always love to go to the guitar shows and whatnot. And the table next to me was a nice gentleman named Terry that I've known for a while. And he was helping this lady who's had all this gear that her husband had left behind. And
He passed away.
yeah, I didn't know how to
sound
fast. Like, how do you say that? How do you say that without being bummed, right?
He passed away.
she's got. Yeah, it was 2 years ago, so it's
Yes.
not fresh anymore. But she was left, I think, about 4 half stacks, 4 amps, gobs of gear.
Marshall half stacks to be precise.
Yeah, vintage. So
Marshall half stack.
she had a JCM 45 from the early 70s, which I really wanted, but I already have that amp.
It was a 71, I believe.
So yeah, and then she still has it, and then she had 2 JMP. And they were, I think, 78 and 79.
77s, both of them.
Are they?
How do I know this?
I don't know. Anyway, I'll take it.
That is actual factual right there. They're both 77s.
Good. So anyway, I mowed on it for about an hour or so.
No, you didn't.
No, he couldn't get
10 minutes.
the hundreds out of his wallet fast enough.
I was like, hey, what's that over there? And he's like, oh,
And actually, no, I did mow over for a little bit.
not much.
well, you started
So
though.
I bought
you
the
bought one.
I bought one.
But
then
wait,
He did it.
a few hours later, when no one else was buying that second one, I got antsy, and I'm like, I gotta get it.
It was like 15 minutes after you bought the first one.
No, it was not.
I think it was 15
It was
minutes.
absolutely not. It was much longer than that.
You sound tested both of them. You did an A/B, and then you bought the one, and then the next thing I know, you're wrapping up the other one there. It was fast.
Well, it's possible he couldn't remember which one was A and
I'm
which
trying
one
to
was
tell
B,
the
so he
story
bought them
of
both.
how it actually went. These two want to embellish it for everybody's entertainment.
No, it's
Sounds
Yes.
like truth. In fact,
it's true. Anyways, please go on with your
In
story.
Honestly,
humor,
Adam.
you find the truth.
I honestly don't remember,
Yeah,
but I'm glad I bought
you were
both of
very
them.
giddy. I was giddy for you, like proxy giddy.
I mean, they still have the original vinyl covers.
That's
Yeah,
a nice.
and these
that's a
were
nice
toured.
plus.
These have been,
Yeah,
they've
the
been played.
one I think the one is a little more beat up than the other because I think it was his favorite one. But
Yeah, but they're not like all the Tolexes like clean. I mean, they were taken very well care of.
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
They both had the original tubes as well.
Wow.
One has Sylvania, and the other one has not RCA, but the other really old. I don't remember.
No, well, the other ones.
Radio Shack.
Sure,
Tongue Soul.
Yeah, maybe those. I don't know.
we'll go with that.
They were really but
71,
I'll
72.
I'll take
Whatever
a
it
picture
takes.
of it again. Yeah. But anyway, I wanted that JCM 45. I still might get it, but
God.
but but I gotta. It's
You know what?
clean. It's clean.
but it's 100 watts, and like
well, so are the
No, not a JCM.
JMPs.
Not a, no.
No,
A
it's
JCM 45 is not 100 watt.
Actually, that was a super lead.
Oh, you had a super lead. Okay.
yeah,
That's
so
a super lead.
Oh.
that
okay.
is 100, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yes.
I think
Yeah,
it is.
Yeah, because that when they clicked that on, everybody put their hands to their ears.
Yeah.
I didn't like the sound of that. I got to be honest.
I got
It
the
sounds
JMPs
really
because they're a
harsh.
lot more useful.
what was the sound of it?
harsh.
Was it?
It was
Yeah,
loud.
It was
Just like
harsh.
But you can
just harsh,
attenuate
like too
it.
loud or trebly or what are you talking
yeah,
about?
I'm just let me go with harsh. Why?
Okay,
Why?
I don't know. I just
That
wanna
one was
know.
more. That's more
Trying to figure it
collectible,
out.
actually. It's worth
well,
more.
but it's been modded too. That was the other thing.
It looks like it was modded, but it was not.
It was. They put a master volume on it.
If there's a master volume, it's
was that the mod?
I wasn't even there buying it. So
I thought the
Clearly,
I thought
clearly,
that was
Jared was not at the guitar show.
yeah, visions of Marshalls dancing in your
Was
head.
it? I don't know if
Yeah.
it was.
now you have to buy a couple of 810 cabinets.
It was. Well, you almost got those too, but they were
No, but the actual the original.
Oh, the A10s. Yeah, no,
The
but
refrigerators.
he almost got the cabinets, but those were 81s. So he did not.
Yeah, she has one more cabinet that came with those amps, and I might buy that from her if she finds the black backs to
Okay.
those speakers.
That's
'Cause
astounding.
those go with those JMPs.
Your wife doesn't listen to the podcast, does she?
no.
No,
Okay, you're safe.
All right. For me,
Or equipment use.
I've been talking with John Sanchez over at Warehouse Guitar Speakers.
What's going on in your music world this week, Todd?
Well, I was talking with John Sanchez over at Warehouse Guitar Speakers, and he wanted to. So we're going to have him on the show. We've got a really cool episode coming up. I'm very excited about this.
Oh, cool.
We're going to basically go over. So if you have a well-known consumer-based amp, right, like a 65 reissue reverb, blackface. Well, I'm looking at your shirt and it's throwing me off. You know, or just an AC-15 or an AC-30, like one of the newer ones that you can go in and get just about anywhere, right?
Right.
What do you do when you want to replace speakers in those? Like, what should you be looking for? And basically, tonally, what can you help with replacement? What can be helped with replacement speakers? So we're going to go through all that. It's going to be fantastic. One of the things that he wanted to do, so they also supply all the all pedal stuff. and they created a new line of pedals which are DIY pedals, but they're kits, but they're made for, and I did a post on this on Instagram, they're made for people who are not Mike or Zach but still want to build. And you know, some of these littler parts, you can end up like ruining your pedal if you do it wrong, especially with the heat of the iron and stuff. So what they've done is they've basically put in all of the little tiny parts and more fragile parts, but still there's lots of through hole parts that you can use so that you can put, you can get better at soldering. So can
it's not
build
just
a pedal,
like throwing the board in a box and putting
right.
the jacks
You're not just going like, I hope I can figure this out, because a lot of the pedal kits, the instructions are, man, they're rough. So DIY pedal people, step up the instruction game, please. And I think for someone who is just starting out, these instructions, it sounds weird, but these instructions are really, really fantastic, because it also shows you how to do subtle mods to the thing that you're doing, and to have a little bit more control over it, and tips on soldering, and it's really great. So he sent us two, they're called Slamurai, the Bushido drive. So they're just cool overdrive pedals, and we're going to build one and sort of document the build. And we're going to give a kit away. Oh. Ooh, unbuilt.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's really fun. And so that's what that's what I got this week.
Well, that's a good week.
Ding 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 dong.
Anytime you can give something away, that's a good week.
I like it. All right. Woo, we got a lot to talk about, everybody. Zach. You started this whole thing out, and fortunately we were able to get Mikey.
I'm sorry.
It's going to be great. Fortunately, we were able to get Mike down here as well. He's a very busy cat, but he made time for us, and so I'm really interested to see the back and forth, the tit for tat, if you will, between the two pedal monsters here. We have the number one question, and which started it all, everybody: the surface mount versus through hole debate. Now, I said, is the debate really that big of a thing? I mean, I hear a little bit about it, but I'm not the one who's building the pedals and getting asked this all the time. So, gentlemen, I turn the topic over to you. Zach, would you please start us off?
Sure. Yeah. So the surface mount thing, it may be more part of the gear page, all the people that know more than you in the gear page sort of thing, that where all the debate mainly happens. But I think it was around a year ago or maybe 2 years ago, there was a YouTuber that had a JHS pedal, and it was one of the Andy Timmons pedal, and did a review of it, took the back off and mentioned that it had all these surface mount components, and was kind of giving JHS a hard time over the fact that it cost $200 or whatever dollars that it cost, and it had these cheap little components in there, and that kind of sparked the fire. And JHS Josh does a great YouTube vlog where he tried to dispel a lot of those myths and rumors that surface mount don't sound as good, they don't function the same or whatever. And I just think, for me personally, I'm getting to a point building these pedals that I can't do the through hole thing myself anymore. It's exhausting, and I need to simplify it. And that's why I looked at surface mount. But I think if you ask people who are purists in the pedal community, they kind of turn their nose up at surface mount and don't really give it the time of day. So Mike, you can chime in. That's kind of my experience in it.
Yeah.
Well, should before we discuss it, should we, so all our listeners know exactly what we're talking about?
Yes, good point, Tony.
And some of the participants in the podcast too.
Yes.
Who would that be? I don't care.
Mike, you go ahead and give them the explain.
Okay, so let's start with through hole. So through hole components, they can consist of your capacitors, your resistors. They're similar to something you would see if you cracked open your guitar, and kind of larger size components. They've been used since the dawn of components. Then later on, as manufacturing got a lot better,
I'm going to actually jump in there.
Yeah.
When we're talking about the through-hole components,
Yeah.
the reason that they're called through-hole is that on the board...
they have. So the reason they're called through-hole is because they're a lot larger, and they actually have what they call leads, which is like, two sides that... if you're assembling, you would solder to those.
So a piece of wire on one side, a piece of wire on the other.
Pretty much.
Those go through the two holes that are designated on the actual circuit board,
Yeah.
and then they're soldered from the back side.
Yep. And so larger components, but as manufacturing got a lot better throughout the years, components started getting smaller. And one of the things that came out of that was smaller components, which are surface mount devices. And these can range, millimeters small.
Yeah. The ones that I just showed everybody in the
Microns.
room, the Bushido
Yeah.
ones, those are micro. They're really, really, really tiny.
Yeah, exactly. So these, surface mount are now used in a lot of newer electronics, your cell phones, laptops,
Right.
all that. But these components look a lot smaller. They don't have the long leads or, conductor leads.
They often look like almost like Lego type of things, just in the sense of
little boxes.
they're little boxes and they have multiple mounts. So you have to actually attach them. It isn't just, you're not just threading something through, you're actually plugging it in.
Yeah, and so the reason why they're called surface mount is because the way you make the connection is you don't, with the through hole, you would feed that through the circuit board and solder it on the other side, on the back side. But whereas these, you can lay it on the circuit board and it has a pad that you would put the solder, and that's how it makes the connection on the surface.
And part of the reason that it can be problematic for maybe less experienced builders, I know that you hunch over a desk and you actually put those things on.
Yeah.
And that's kind of nuts. I've seen you, do that.
Yeah.
And for those builders that are maybe not as gifted, you can start to run into some major problems. You can ruin an entire pedal if you overheat it, right?
The pads are a lot smaller, so, you can't hang out too long with your soldering iron on those pads. A lot smaller, so you're dealing with, smaller components, and so that can be kind of time consuming, if you're not used to handling those.
Right. So, from opening it up back to Zach and Tony, what is or Mike
Or whoever's in the room.
yeah.
Or Jared.
So what are the advantages aside from size? All right, if size wasn't an issue, wait for it. Then just is there a real advantage or disadvantage if you have the exact same component that is a surface mount, and the exact same component, I mean like the value or the purpose of it, is there an advantage to that being surface mount versus through hole?
Scientifically, they're the same makeup. And each one, each device has a tolerance of its own. And that's kind of where a lot of older through-hole components, they have a wider range of tolerance. And what the tolerance is you have, say a component is supposed to be a specific value. Well, if it has a larger tolerance, it might not be that value that it says. It could be a lot higher or a lot lower than what it's rated. And so that
would translate into give or take a few on either side.
Exactly. So that's why a lot of older style pedals that, implement, older components that have higher tolerances, you might play one fuzz pedal, and then all of a sudden you play another one, which is made by the same company, same exact effect, but it sounds a lot different.
So, Zach, I'm going to have you jump in real quick, but I'm going to give an analogy in case this is floating over anybody's head. If you get into a car, particularly an older car, and you start to turn the steering wheel, if it's a real low tolerance, you're going to have a very responsive steering wheel. If you have a very high tolerance, that's when you get that play where you're like, I'm moving my hands, but I'm still going straight.
Yeah. But here's the thing, though, is these surface mount components, they too also have their own tolerances. And you can actually buy through-hole components that have tolerances, like pretty fine tolerances. So they wouldn't have that wide of a range. And it's almost to the point where these through-hole can match the same tolerance as like a SMD. So at that point, you're almost, apples to apples, comparing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Zach.
Yeah. On paper, and here's the thing, and this is the thing that a lot of people try to express is, on a schematic, electronically, it's going to do the same job. But while we do play and experience sound with our ears, there is something to be said about taking the back off a pedal and seeing a big component in there, seeing a big transistor. It's got mojo, it's got a vibe, and it's got a psychological effect that I think a lot of us kind of fall victim to. But, one of the more advantageous reasons to use surface mount is you can have a fabrication house make them for you, which they'll have what's called a pick and place machine where it has a little arm and it goes around and picks up the parts and puts it on the board. That way a human doesn't have to do it. So your cost, it's more cost effective. And since the parts are so small, you can do more complex things in a smaller space. So it kind of gives you a little bit more of a creative playground, so you can throw more things on a pedal and do more stuff without the limitations of having to worry about all these larger through-hole components that, are more than double the size of the vast majority of pedals that use surface mount.
Yeah. It's interesting. The broadside underdrive that I got from Hello Sailor Effects, when I cracked that open, I swear there was a hot dog in there. Like there's this old component that's just like, I was like, wow, that's the biggest component I've ever seen in a pedal. It was pretty neat.
Probably an old military spec resistor.
It very well could be. I think one of the things that you're touching on, though, is there's also, when you see something that is made by robots, then does it detract from the idea that like Zach made this, or that Mikey made this, or anybody else made this? Because now you're introducing, well,
right?
Did they? How much did they? Did they design it and then say, all right, robots, do your thing. My fingerprint is no longer on this. Right. And when you're paying a lot of money for a pedal, that you subscribe to that brand and you have an affinity for the pedal and the pedal builder and the kind of music that it's associated with, that is why we buy the gear that we do, is because we want that actual connection. We talk about this all the time on the show, the connection between the builder and the one who purchases it, and why we do these things. Yeah. It's almost the reason that there is a boutique explosion up against like Boss or Ibanez or something like that.
Right. And I think part of it, because that's a very valid point, and I think that's a thing that a lot of people argue online, is like, if a robot made it, how did Zach claim to make it? But one thing that's so crucial about anything is the design of something.
Yes,
and absolutely. Just speaking from my own experience with the Mjolnir, I've redesigned that multiple times, and every time, I've done a whole new circuit board. It sounds different. So that is such a big part of it. And I think what I've learned in doing this over the past number of years is that there's a lot of artistry in doing the circuit board. And I think a lot of people don't understand that, and then they don't get it. And they think if a robot did it, that it was done completely in a computer where you click the button and it's done for you. But every single thing that I've done, I hand lay out, I draw the traces, I make the circuit board like I was doing it on paper, just in a computer, but I made it. And I think that's a big part of it that people need to understand and kind of comprehend, because I totally get their point too.
I just as a kind of a novice here, are the surface mount ones, the circuitry, is it more efficient? Is there? Obviously, it's it can be maybe a faster assembly.
Yeah, like a production difference.
But in terms of the efficiency of the circuit itself, is there any difference between the two?
I'd say they're incredibly more reliable. A lot of them can operate at higher voltages, and just like Mike was saying, there's the permutations of every single component. There's almost an infinite number of different styles for, you say you have 100K resistor, there may be 100 versions of that with different tolerances and voltage ratings and wattages and things like that. So, but really they operate the same, if not more efficiently. So,
And I think, Zach, you were getting at it is, you have these components, and I mean, they're all, they have different values, different, they do different things, but it really comes down to how you implement that design and how you're reaching the consumer, right?
Yeah.
And you can see that in, the overdrive, distortion fuzz world is there's so many different, different types of designs and different flavors. And, and what really attracts the consumer is how that sound or how that design kind of resonates with them. And so I think that's where you start kind of getting that separation is, one thing is through hole or SMD, but it's really kind of how does that design connect with the user? Does that make sense?
Right.
Yeah.
But does the user even notice?
Well, that's the thing too, is there's so many, you have some people that actually care about that.
Really?
You have some people who don't.
Yeah.
What I call
that's why I sent you guys the 2 pedals.
Yeah. And I think this can kind of relate too with you, Jared, right? With old
pickup stuff.
With the old pickup stuff and new pickup stuff.
Generally, in my opinion, people see and let me rephrase that. People hear with their eyes.
They see with their eyes too.
Yeah. But when people open up a pedal or, they look at a pickup and they look at the color of the wire.
Yeah.
Then that can turn them off to that pickup because they think it's going to sound way different.
Well, it's the same thing in your world is, somebody has, a copper wire from, the 60s.
Yeah.
And then how much different is that than a copper wire in the 2000s? You deal with probably the same thing, right?
Yeah. It's the same
line.
thing because it does the same thing.
Yeah.
It operates the same way. As long as it's the same diameter and the outer insulation is fairly the same.
But I think it boils down to how does that pickup sound? Yeah. And also, in the pickup world, how does that pickup look? That plays another part into it too.
Yeah.
And I think we get into the same argument over like high voltage paper and oil caps in a guitar tone circuit.
Oh yeah. Definitely.
On paper, it doesn't make any difference, but people, myself included, I perceive a difference, even though it's a passive circuit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll have to do the Pepsi Coke test.
I like it.
This is not
There you go.
unlike some of the discussions I've gotten with the actual guitar builders where there are some people who are taking an immense amount of pride in doing everything by hand.
Yeah.
And then they have an end product. And then they can take issue with someone who's doing everything in CNC and they have an end product. That end product for the consumer doesn't matter. How much does it matter? And I'm certainly not going to take sides on that. I'm not getting anywhere near that.
Mr. Switzerland.
Yes. Yes. You guys discuss that amongst yourselves. That's my best Swiss I could conjure in a moment's notice.
I'm taking the same position Todd is on that.
Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah.
I'm gonna. I'll state my opinion.
Hearing with eyes.
Yeah.
I'll let people hear with eyes all they want.
Well,
That's fine.
That actually gets into a really interesting. Let's shift off of this topic, and let's hit another one. I'm just gonna move ahead because we actually have a segue that I may be in danger of running out.
Whoa!
Nice.
Which is, how much does hype play in the value and/or desirability of a pedal?
Or a guitar, or an amp.
Well, let's stick to pedal tonight.
All right, whatever you want to do, Tom.
Yeah, we never talk
So
about that.
this was another thing that Zach and I were talking about on the phone. I mean, that was dang near a whole episode that we had on the phone.
Why didn't you record it?
I know, right?
Yeah,
It was great.
Yeah, we talked for like 45 minutes.
It was.
You could have
honestly.
just dubbed us in, you know.
We could, yes. Maybe I should start doing that. Be easier. So we talked about a couple pedals that we absolutely will not get anywhere close to naming, that we have seen skyrocket in demand or in value or in, just sort of hype, and we talked about what is the reason for that? Why did that happen? Is it warranted? So I'm curious to know from a builder's standpoint, okay, first, and then we'll get into all the other clowns in the room. From a builder's standpoint, where do you both kind of sit on, the hype machine for pedal sales? Let's start with Zach again.
Well, for me, I would be really excited if something like that happened. If a pedal I made, and it's kind of happened a few times, but not to the extreme of these other pedals that will not be named. But I mean, it's all about getting into the zeitgeist, getting into the conversation. When people think pedals, they want to think of you, and I want that to be part of my thing too. And it's kind of happened lately with the high road fuzz. I don't know if you guys have seen that on my Instagram, but sometimes here's the thing. It happens, all the time when you see stuff that gets hyped and then skyrockets on eBay, on Reverb and whatnot. Those things to me are a little unwarranted, because if you can still buy something new and it's $100-$200 cheaper, I just don't think that that's reasonable. And if that happened to one of my pedals, I would kind of tell everybody to pump the brakes. I'd be excited for the sales directly, but on the used market, if stuff was selling for bananas money, I would try to squash that.
And like Todd said, how much does hype play into the value and desirability of the pedal? I think it plays a huge part, and I think you can vouch for this, Zach, is hype is just another market strategy, right?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Yeah, and so I think it plays a huge part. And, as if someone's able to hype up a pedal, I mean, big enough, in a way you could almost make it sound better, if that makes any sense.
Totally.
Yeah, and because I don't know how many, and this is even before I even got into the whole thing of playing pedals, is I had friends come up to me saying, "Hey man, you got to try this new pedal, blah, 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 XYZ, guitar player plays this thing, and so does blah, 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 and you got to try this thing. This thing sounds like crap," but the fact that somebody else plays it, or maybe that it's hyped up, I'm like, it can kind of play a part.
And you make a good point, because I mean, before, recently, I guess, people would try to get a pedal or a guitar or an amp or something that their favorite player, presumably played. A lot of times they just put their name on things. But yeah, but now it's interesting, because now it seems like it doesn't matter who's playing it. It's if certain names get thrown around in terms of the pedals or things like that, it has its own little life of its own.
I think when we're talking about the hype game, there is something to be considered, which is when you have a builder that has created a couple of really great pedals and has built, an array of great effects and or they are collectible for certain reasons, whether they're hand painted or whether they're unique knobs or designs or whatever it is. Then when they do the next one, it's the hype is predicated on the previous pedal. So anybody who like me, if I like a specific pedal that because of a certain reason, and that builder comes out with a new one, I'm much more apt to get really excited about that and get it sight unseen or sound unheard.
Yeah.
Simply because I know what that builder is about. I know what their build standard is. I'm excited to get it because I'm already invested in that brand. And when you get into another situation, which is like, whoa, where'd this pedal come from out of nowhere? But like, all I'm seeing on Instagram is this pedal everywhere, or demos of this pedal, and you're just like, wow, that's cool, but like, what's the hype all about?
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I think that's it's like that with almost anything, though. I guess I'd assume, but yeah, Instagram has changed everything, especially for us. I think that it's given people the ability to trend, and that has totally shaped how people have. It's shaped all their purchasing decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
exactly. So hype, good or bad, is obviously something we all have to deal with. And, I think if there is a lot of hype around something, it's probably worth, it's probably worth checking out, but, that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to totally subscribe to it. Make your own decision and challenge those things. I think that's what a lot of what we were doing. It was like we were sort of like it was a little bit of rock paper scissors. Like, all right, I'm going to say this one. Am I going to show my hand here?
Right.
And we agreed on quite a few that we're like, really? It was a very interesting conversation, and I'm glad that we are not showing our hands right now. Anyways. You go and do this with your own friends. Have your own debates about this. I'm going to get out of this one. Okay, so here's another great one. Digital versus analog. Oh my gosh.
Bum, bum, bum.
Yeah. So, Zach, this was a big one. We'll just keep with the onesie-twosie here. Go ahead. Start us off.
Well, yeah, so I'm working on a delay. I think I'm ready to enter that arena. And the first thing I get asked whenever I was making mention of it online is it going to be analog? And then when I poll people and say, hey, what would you want it to do? And they're telling me I want it to tap and subdivide and then do all this stuff. And I'm like, you realize that making something analog to do that is very complicated and very expensive. So there is I think there's a trend now that obviously we see everywhere with Strymon and Eventide and Source Audio and so many people that digital is becoming okay and normal. But when it comes to boutique pedals, a lot of people still think analog is better or analog is the only way, and they don't understand all the shortcomings, limitations, and the costs that go along with doing something in an analog way.
And we'll touch on that in a couple questions here.
As for me, I don't know, just play what sounds good. That's kind of my philosophy. I played some digital pedals that sound good. I played some analog pedals that sound good. For me, Zach kind of pointed this out, is a delay. And so you guys all know that I've been working on this delay. I think I mentioned on this podcast
we got dueling delay releases.
Oh, dual delay. And so my delay, the Wilderness, I advertise it as an analog voice because it is a delay pedal. It is a digital delay pedal, but it has darker repeats, something that you would find with an analog pedal. But
explain that real quick.
Yeah.
Darker repeats.
Darker repeats.
Decided being a great band name.
So Darker Repeats. Before I was kicked out of Darker Repeats. Yeah. No, so when I say Darker Repeats, the way delay works is, guitar signal comes in, delays the signal. And there's usually a feedback control associated with that. And what it does is it sends that delayed signal back into whatever delayed it, right? And there's a lot of association with digital pedals having a bright or kind of a a lot more highs in the feedback. So when, you know, the pedal's delayed, it has a lot more higher frequencies that kind of pop out at you. Whereas a darker delay would have kind of those higher frequencies kind of.
Could that be
lower.
classified as decay?
Yeah, in a way. Yeah, in a way, because I mean, if it's, you know, repeating a lot of those, I guess.
So a
notes
digital
would be-
one is maintaining it at a perfect,
exactly
at a perfect perfectness
Yeah.
at every single repeat. It's just diminishing repeats. Where an analog, the signal will actually be not perfect the farther down it goes.
Yeah.
Check me out. Look, I didn't even.
Yeah,
I didn't even go to school for none of this.
But you know, it's just, I don't know. I mean, I played analog. Well, you know, since we're talking delays, you know, I played analog delays that sound like crap. You know, they can be too dark to where it just sounds muddy.
That's probably what I've been playing this whole time.
No, that's just your
I sound
playing.
Just the crap he played. Well, you know,
That's
crap
what
that
it was.
crap that goes into a delay.
Yeah.
Crap in, crap out.
Crap in, crap out.
I'm gonna assume one of the first delay pedals out there that's analog is what, the Echoplex.
Yeah.
So I just want to bring that up because they're really
tape,
cool.
Tape delays.
Yeah, tape delay.
Yeah.
And so, but you know, as Zach pointed out, there's a lot. You have a lot more companies coming out with pedals that are, you know, digital, but they try to emulate the analog sound.
Yeah.
And even now, there's a lot more pedals. You see this with the Line 6. You see this with the Kempler. All these other all these other processors that can process overdrive, distortion, fuzz. And, you know, to be honest, a lot of these systems come pretty close to the real thing.
Yeah.
So,
Well, let me ask you a real
Yeah.
quick question. When we're talking about analog delays
Yeah.
versus digital delays,
Yeah.
I have, not being a professor of electronics, it seems like there's always this thing brought up about, well, of course, it's an analog pedal, but we do use what's the chip that's in every, like,
Bucket Brigade.
well, yeah, the Bucket
Brigade.
Brigade chip that was in like the original Boss. Anyways,
DM2.
you know,
DM3,
what's the chip called?
It's what the MN300, blah, blah, blah.
It's
Yeah.
the one that basically
It's
is
the
like,
bucket-
if you're
what
gonna do
Tony
it,
said,
yeah,
Bucket
the Bucket
Brigade.
Brigade.
Yeah.
So, and can just explain bucket grip, but gosh, solder.
Solderless. Mjolnir.
Explain Bucket Brigade.
So with the
Mjolnir.
so older. Oh, did my thing just
No.
disconnect? Oh, okay. What is this cable then?
Don't worry about it.
Put that in your mouth.
For all of you
just
guys
how we
at
roll
home,
here.
a cable just dropped from my microphone, but apparently my microphone still works.
It's a different one.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, you know, as mentioned before, there's tape delays. There's also, you know, the Memory Man effect, which uses a Bucket Brigade chip.
Okay.
Now, other delays do use the Bucket Brigade, but the Bucket Brigade, the way it works is you have a signal and it's just passed down a series of delays. And then you sum up all the delays and you got a really long delay. So that's all it is. And the reason why it's called Bucket Brigade is because back in the day, you know, before we had really advanced fire trucks and everything, is the firemen would, you know, imagine having like a line and you fill up a bucket and you pass it down the line. Well, you know, you got some people that shake, you got some people that, you know, sneeze when they're holding the bucket, you know, and by the time that full
Probably a
bucket,
thirsty fireman or two.
Yeah.
Are they allergic to buckets?
Oh,
They might be.
Is that why they sneeze?
It could be the
So we get a lot of spillage.
So you get a lot of spillage. So you start with a full bucket, and then by the time you get to the end of the line, you end up with, you know, a bucket that may have lost a lot of water, and that can kind of be brought back to the effect itself. You know, a lot of these, you know, the signal comes in through the Bucket Brigade, and by the time the signal comes out of the Bucket Brigade, you can lose a lot of frequencies in your guitar signal.
Right.
And so that's partially why some of these sound either dirty or darker, as
Right.
mentioned before.
Right.
Yeah.
Zach, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, yeah, I think, you know, people don't understand the reason why I wanted to do this podcast and talk about Surface and all the the competing ideas that a lot of people have about pedals in general is, people want huge feature sets. They want all these things, and they don't understand the limitations that a lot of these chips have, and just like cost of making it work. Analog is much what I prefer. I love analog circuits. And to be fair, a lot of vintage analog pedals like the Deluxe Memory Man and whatnot were pretty bright. They're not all these echo repeat things, but I just think that people have to come around to the ideas. We've accepted Kempers, we've accepted the Helix, but sometimes, like I said earlier, when people hear that you're making a delay and it's digital, they're like, oh, I don't like digital delay. They're too bright. Like people have to kind of realign their notion of what these things are and what they do and how we can manipulate them to sound how we want them to sound.
Right.
Exactly. And I think, just to summarize, I think this point, and also even a point before, with the hype, is just play something that sounds good to you. Whether it's digital, whether it's analog, if it sounds good, it sounds good. And we mentioned a difference between a lot of these pedals in the boutique world is their designs and how that resonates with the consumer. So find a design that fits you, find a design that you think sounds more true to your playing, more true to kind of what you're playing.
And I think a good analogy would be vinyl records versus CDs or digital recordings.
It's like night and day.
I mean, to the human ear, I think that the analog sound of vinyl is more pleasing, but it does have limitations, and it eventually with a record it wears out.
Yeah.
All right. So one of the things that came up again in our conversation, and Mike, we've talked about this before. Tony, we've talked about this before. Jared, we definitely have not talked about this before. But so I hear a lot of noise about, parts. So specifically like the germanium factor and other things, which is like, hey, some of these things we've been using for a long time, but they're not making them anymore. Things are being depleted. Let's talk about that a little bit. Zach, you want to take us into that conversation?
Sure. Yeah. So we are in finite supply on a lot of through-hole components, especially transistors. I think that's the thing that most people in our industry are kind of like, especially in the smaller communities, the do-it-yourself sort of groups and stuff. Like you can't get a lot of the same transistors anymore because companies aren't making them. And then the ones that are making them, they are nowhere near the same spec as the ones that were made previously or made, here in the States or in Japan or whatever. But those sort of components are just kind of disappearing. And even some other things that I've encountered, little ribbon cables. And this is something that seems so unimportant, but ribbon cables to connect between the circuit board and the foot switch, Molex, which is probably one of the most well-known companies to make those sort of things, they don't make them anymore. So if you want little 6-wire ribbon connectors that are 2 inches, like you have to buy them now because one day they're going to be all gone and you have to get them custom made for you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Mike?
So with the components that are being now, I guess, turned obsolete, you actually there's a couple more companies that are actually coming out and trying to redo a lot of these older chips because one example is the Bucket Brigade chip that we talked about, because back in the day, those Bucket Brigade chips were actually used for, common commercial electronics. And since then, we've adapted smarter technology. And so those components aren't used really in any type of commercial electronics. But us guitarists, same thing with tubes. Your computer, your radio is not powered using a tube anymore, but we musicians still find an application for that. So as with these tube companies, there's a lot more companies trying to take the old technology and remanufacture that. One being, Panasonic, they used to do the Bucket Brigade chips, all the different timing chips for the delays that you see in the vintage delays. But now I think it's Cool Audio. They're doing, they're kind of taking that same exact technology that was used in those circuits or the integrated chips for the Bucket Brigade devices, and they're kind of like coming back out with it. So it's kind of a revamped chip, but it uses the same kind of, it reacts the same.
Right.
So I think there's, you know, mind you, it'd definitely be hard, but there's definitely a market out there to kind of bring back these vintage electronics.
Well, whenever we see stuff, I'm for sure, Zach, I know you know this, that when you see something on Instagram and it's like, I just got a big box of germanium transistors from Russia, you know, or something like that.
Yeah.
Everybody freaks out, right? Now, those of us who don't know about this, that we're like, why are you guys all, you know, getting crazy about this?
Yeah.
So that's actually really helpful to understand why that.
Yeah. And so for those of you unfamiliar with the whole thing, silicone, germanium, silicone down to, if you follow it up its train, it's actually just sand. That's originally how they, you know, after you go through the whole manufacturing process, you end up with this, they call it a silicone wafer, and that's what they use to process all these semiconductors like transistors, you know, op amps, all these different devices use silicone. But back in the day, before silicone was kind of the industry standard, they used other chemicals and dopants, what they call them, and one of those being germanium. And it's just a different way for the component to react.
But it has the coolest of all names.
Germanium, right? I know. And so all these different chemicals have different, they react differently, you know, electronic wise. And, but silicone's a lot easier to make. And so it's a lot easier to make, has a smaller tolerance, so that's kind of why it's become the industry standard. And as mentioned before, whatever becomes the industry standard, if it's not the standard, then it's out the door. Yeah. And that's kind of what's happening with germanium transistors.
Yeah. Interesting. Well,
there's a big misconception about what germanium actually is. Yeah. At least I've recognized this when I'm doing pedals.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people say, like the Golden Fleece, for example, they say, "Oh, is it germanium?" Mm-hmm. And they don't understand what that means. That's just a buzzword for a lot of people. Now, really for pedal builders, we get it, but for a lot of people, it's a super buzzword. Yep. Yeah.
I mean, do those? I know you probably try to get a bunch of new old stock kinds of things. Do they degrade over time, like most other electronic components?
Yeah. So germanium, you know, if you talk to somebody in the DIY community, they talk about current leakage. There's all different kind of parameters that change because, I mean, just the same way, you know, you buy an old car, it's going to rust. Same things happen with components is they age over time. And yeah, so I don't know if Zach has anything on that one.
Yeah. Yeah, I've bought vintage style components that the leads were actually so corroded they couldn't really take solder, and I'd have to take some sandpaper and sand them so I could actually put them in something because they were just so old.
Yeah, and so that I'm assuming that you know, as compared to like the silicone counterpart, you probably paid a lot more for those units, right?
Right.
Yeah,
and that's something too that, you know, people that are trying to bring back this age of analog and resurrect the dead components, as it were, it's coming at quite the cost. Yep. So everything NOS and NOS style, those cool audio chips are way more expensive than they used to be, just because, you know, they kind of have to be now. And that's part of the argument for analog versus digital too. Like, why would you spend so much more for something that does the same job, arguably worse than the newer technology,
and not as stable either? I know, like, one of the big things with you know, a really, really great germanium, you know, fuzz pedal or something is that if you're playing a super long set and you've got that thing juiced for quite a long time,
it changes over time.
It changes the sound. And and then there's also, like, if it gets too cold, so if you're in the northern states and you got your board in the back and then you plug it in, you know, what's happening there.
Yeah.
I obviously don't know all the wherewithal without that, but, you know, You guys probably
and
know
I think
more.
that's one good thing for the listeners to know is, if they're in the market, they're searching for a fuzz or whatever, and they're wondering, man, what's the difference between this? Why is silicone a lot cheaper than this germanium alternative? That's because the builder has to source these parts out. They end up costing more, and you might buy 100 germanium transistors, and because of their degradation over time, you might be able to only use 40 of them. So that's kind of where that cost comes. If a musician's looking for silicone or germanium transistor.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So let's see. Speaking of whether things are necessary or not, tap pedals. That seems to be a big one right now, considering both of you put it on the list of questions. Let's talk a little bit about tap pedals. Zach, where were you going with that?
Well, I think, Mike sent some conversation points, and I was looking at that, and I was, there's like this, like a checklist that a lot of people have for things, and a lot of people really want the max amount of feature sets for pedals, but do they really need it? Because how accurate can you be to a BPM with your toe? If you're really needing to sync up with stuff. So, that's kind of the thing. It's like, I understand the point of a lot of super technical and feature rich pedals, but what need versus want, that I think that's a thing that a lot of people don't consider when it comes to everything they buy, but pedals especially.
And we can probably open this up to like presets and stuff too, and loops, and just we actually brought this up on the last the episode, one of the last episodes, where we discussed like the idea of what should your pedal be doing versus what can it possibly do, and which one is more. What's better to have, or so that was obviously, it's a very subjective subject, but
there has to be a useful range,
right?
I mean, you can with electronics pretty much make it do just about anything,
right?
But to
what
make
end?
To make it useful and to put it into what's acceptable to the human ear or whatever.
Well, and that goes even into absolutely no knocking these things, because they are truly amazing pedals. We've played them, we've had them on the show, but Strymon, 9 out of 10 people that share their 4 on the floor where they mention a Strymon, they said, I got a couple that I liked, and that's kind of where I stopped, or even the Chase Bliss stuff, which is like, they are amazing pedals. There is a huge amount of smarts and technology that go into them. Yep. But at the end of the day, the user's only going, like a foot into the mile of what it can be, is that the right pedal for you? That's just something to think. And it could be the right pedal for you because you really love the brand and you really want to get the next one in line, so that, because you like the other stuff, which is totally cool. But it's just something that we've noticed speaking to people on the show, especially when it comes to the 4 on the floors.
Right.
Aside from how about the presets? That's a big one right now. We're seeing a lot of preset pedals that are not big box stuff. Like, Mike, I know you do a lot of stuff with presets.
Yeah, so one of my pedals that have presets is the Ghost Ridge Reverb. Mm-hmm. And
that's gotten a lot of great reviews. And I'm not just saying that because I don't own it or anything, but legitimately it's gotten a lot of great reviews.
One of the biggest things where that kind of was born from is I'm a musician. I play live, and the reverb the reverb pedal that I had was a Nudabear Wet, and love that reverb, sweetest reverb ever. But the one that I had was the stereo or mono, one of those, but it had mix and depth, and it just had, and I had like, my settings would be at both knobs at 11 or either both knobs at 1. I had like 2 settings that I would bounce between the 2. And so, I'd be playing, live during the set, and then I have to get down, twist them, and then I get back to the other part of the song, bend down, twist them. And I was like, man, this sucks, but I really only need a couple presets, because I've tried other companies' products that have multiple presets, and as for me, I don't need to bounce between preset number 0 to 65. I'm not going to do that in one set. And, for me, I can only keep track of probably 4 or less,
Right.
Because after that, I'm like, wait, what was number 10? Or what was number 26? But there is a place for that. But as for me, I just don't find a place for it. But I do see presets as a usable, it's, for the musician, it's usable because you might have different types of sounds that you implement, in a song.
Yeah.
In a song you might have where you kind of have dry and then you come up on that solo that you need to rip.
Yeah.
And then you need
I
a
do
lot
that
more.
all day long.
You need a lot more. You need a lot more space. So you need to bounce bounce to a heavier kind of reverb. And so I think presets are a good useful tool, and it just depends on what's applicable to you.
Yeah, and there's a lot of different kinds of those as well. I think people have been really smart about them. You'd certainly have a way of that you figured out that's worked with it.
Yeah.
I know we've had Swindler Effects. They've got a really great way to do presets. It's only 2 presets.
And then you have Matthew Effects, who has their Strummer and their
Yeah. So there's a lot of great ways, and that's the kind of preset can dictate, well, do I want that pedal or not? So
exactly.
Interesting stuff.
Right.
Okay. What makes a great overdrive? That is a question. That's the question of the ages when it comes to pedals, I think. I feel like that. I'm kind of an overdrive guy. I like that.
Yeah.
Mike, I know that you specifically wanted to hear from Zach's standpoint because he does do a lot of overdrive.
Yeah, and exactly. I just wanted to hear from Zach because he makes phenomenal overdrives, and so I kind of want to just get his perspective on the whole overdrive fuzz distortion market.
Yeah, what makes a good what in your mind makes a good one and why?
Exactly.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's funny, like my guitar pedal collection, people ask me all the time, like, what kind of cool stuff do you have? And I'm like, I just have overdrives, man. That's like all I got. But I think the best thing about any gain pedal, be that a clean boost, be that an overdrive, a distortion, or even a fuzz, is that, well, maybe not necessarily a fuzz, but overdrives and distortion especially, they don't need to take anything away, and they don't need to get in the way of your guitar experience. They need to take you up and give you more of something, be that a different tonal shift or just a little bit more of an inspired tone or more compression and sustain. But I think the thing that makes an overdrive pedal great is that it only adds to your guitar and your amp and your tone, and it never takes anything away. And that's kind of how I've approached everything I make.
Solid.
Yeah, that's good. So Zach, when you're working on like the overdrives, because you talk about like not taking away the character, and do you try these when you design these? Do you play these through like a Les Paul type of guitar, Strat type of guitar? Like, are you playing through these through multiple guitars? Well,
yeah, like so. I whenever I design anything, I play it with all my guitars, which are mostly humbuckers and P90 loaded. A lot of Brandon wound P90s in there. Hey,
Nice.
Those are good.
But whenever I get done designing something or I have a really solid prototype, I'll try it with my setups. I have Les Pauls. I have I have a Revolta guitar, a Tele, and I'll play it with a British style amp and a American style amp. And then I take it to stores, like dealers around town, and I'll play it with Strats, with Teles, with, whatever, into Vox, into, Hot Rod DeVille, Blues Junior, everything, because I don't think you should ever get a pedal and put it in front of your rig and be so utterly disappointed. And I think that, that very well can happen, but yeah, I try to make it as universal as possible, and that, sometimes it's not easy.
Okay. That's actually, you bring up a really good point. I was going to ask both Jared and Tony what their thoughts are on what makes a good overdrive to them. I know that we were actually just talking about a particular overdrive that Jared, you'd put in front of your Marshall, and you said you hated it, and we're all like, what? So talk from your perspective, Jared, talk about overdrive a little bit here.
Well, I think it depends. Number one, it does depend what amp you're using it in front of. That matters unbelievably a lot. The pedal, that I tested out, of course, it just didn't sound good through the amp I put it through. I also have a Mutron, whichever you prefer, and it's got the squeezer and the compression, the overdrive on that. That sounds like garbage through my Marshall, but it sounds awesome through my twin reverb.
Yeah. Well, Marshalls don't like to be front loaded.
No, I don't think they do. So I don't really have a preference on, what's my absolute favorite overdrive of all time. It just has to sound good with the rig I'm using.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, in my opinion, I like something that doesn't color the sound so much that you don't recognize it, but it makes, the ultimate sound to me, it's an improvement over what the amp can produce by itself. And whether that's a little more bottom end, a little more high end, there's a certain something that you can hear that I think really defines what a really good overdrive pedal sounds like.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think we would all unanimously agree with that. And then the magic starts happening when you stack, because then you start getting, everything's going to have some tonal quality to it, whether it's perceivable or not. And when you start to stack, then those things can actually compound each other, and you can go like, "Whoa, dude, that actually sounds kind of harmonic. I dig it."
I'm gonna go against you, man. I'm not a stacker.
No,
not a snacker.
No,
only when it comes to pancakes.
Yes. No, but I'm not a stacker. Like I like to, in a sense, let the overdrive kind of do its thing, because I feel like when you not that. It doesn't sound bad, but I like to kind of let the pedal shine for itself and let it do its own thing. That's kind of where I'm at with that.
Yeah. Zach, what about you? Stacking.
Well, I usually have my amp at the cusp of breaking up, and so that's kind of where my amp lives. And then I use all my gain pedals, relatively low gain, just run them loud. And then I do usually stack them. I'll have my bass guitar tone, my pedals, or like my boost pedal, and then my overdrive pedal. But I'm riding my guitar volume constantly.
Interesting.
I that's how I play guitar, and I think that's how guys that play like me, who are like, honestly, when I play guitar, I don't even plug in pedals. I just plug into my amp, and like when you're used to using your guitar volume, you just want things to just give you more and more in smaller increment.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So one final note about like stacking, and this is, I don't necessarily do like overdrive, but what I like to do is have my overdrive or a preamp or something and stack. I like stacking things that drive, but not necessarily to do the same thing. And what I find that comes out of that is if I just have the pedal itself and it does that, well, it is limited by what only that pedal can do. But when I put it together with something else and blend it, then it gets something that was never intended or thought of, and actually pretty unique. And I will say, coming out of a lot of the shows, I get asked about the tone that I have often, because I don't know if it's bad. It might be just because it's bad, but it's got this kind of quality to it that I couldn't duplicate if I tried. But if I put these two pedals together, blammo, I get it. So anyways, that's something to consider when we're talking about stacking drives. It doesn't have to be stacking overdrives, but play around and see what other things do. I mean, heck, you could even take, some of these other new ones that like the delays and reverbs that are actually putting in dirt into those and use that as a stack instead of just a modulation.
Yeah.
That could be really cool too.
Yeah. My new delay is going to have like a preamp in it, so you can actually drive your amp pretty hard with it, which is pretty cool. I'm excited.
Oh, that's
nice,
awesome.
Nice. Well, speaking of your pedals, this thing all started with these two funny little men that are the Golden Fleece twins here. And your question to us was, you sent these out and you said, play these, want you guys all to play them, and tell us if you feel like there is a difference. So we're going to report on that for you real quick, okay? We did not crack these open. There is one pedal with a clear knob and one pedal with the sort of Bakelite style brown knob. They're both I don't know, what would you call this? That's kind of like the Klon kind of knob, right?
Yeah, I think they call
you
them
guys know the actual
chicken.
Yeah.
What do they call them? Chicken something?
No, that's
like
those aren't
Davies
chicken.
1400, I think.
Yeah. So, anyways,
They're chickens.
all right,
Oh wait, those. Yeah.
Tony,
Yes.
report.
All right. So here are my observations, although there's not, in my opinion, a lot of difference between the two. But some of the things that I noticed, the one with the clear knob seemed to be a little bit brighter. And the way I tested them is as I do with a lot of pedals, is I want to see what level unity gain is. So in other words, the sound with the pedal on or off
Should be about the same
the
level.
volume level should be about the same. And I noticed that the clear knob one, it had a little bit lower unity gain. So I'm thinking that's maybe a little more efficient circuitry.
Guess yet. Don't guess.
I'm not guessing. Okay. The red knob one or brown knob one, whatever you want to call it there.
Blood red.
The blood red one.
Wine red.
I think that one just ever so slightly had to be a little bit higher at the unity gain. But the one thing I noticed, it seemed to be a little bit darker as you boosted the levels up, which I think I know my guess.
Okay, don't say your guess.
I'm not going to guess.
Zach
yet.
will reveal all at the end. And then Mike didn't have a chance to play these.
Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't have the opportunity
Because he lives in Dayton.
Yep.
But Jared, I think you echoed a similar experience with these, right?
Absolutely.
Because you were saying how, especially with the brightness, that was the one thing that you called out when we were talking about these.
Yeah.
They are bright yellow.
Yeah, well, they
mean,
are bright
no.
yellow. Yeah,
That's the way they sound.
yeah. As for me, I echo that it was just, it's
A skunch.
It's subtle.
I mean, and
It's
we're
subtle.
talking just,
It's subtle. However, what I got out of this was the clear knob had a almost, I don't know if it was a brightness or just a little bit more clarity on the higher end of things, which could be considered brightness.
Some would call that.
But maybe not. But I think it's a slightly different quality. And
That's one way to beat around the bush.
A clarity on the treble levels.
Who do you want to write your descriptions, everybody?
It's pretty
Anyways, and then the other one, which is the Bakelite style knob, I found had just a slight bit more like, I don't know if it was like a harmonic
Woolly
feel to it. It just had a little
woolly,
like a je ne sais quoi.
It's like a little woolier.
A certain Genesis.
Yeah, it had a certain je ne sais quoi. So that being said, okay, if I was going to choose one of these,
Yes,
I probably would have gone with the brown knob.
I agree.
The wine red.
But depending on what amp I only played it through my Supra, which is bright.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you're playing it through something else, maybe that's not the case. And Tony, you played it through your Vox.
Vox AC15.
Did you do it through your Dr. Z?
I did not do it through the Z, no.
Okay. And Jared, you ran it through.
I ran it through my Fender Twin.
Okay. All right. So that's 3 brights.
Yeah, those are
So
all
maybe
bright.
that's something weighing in. So
All right.
So Zach, what are you doing here? What's going on?
Well, I kind of like you guys to guess which one is the through hole and which one is the surface mount.
I'm gonna.
And it sounds like it would all be. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm gonna guess that the brown Bakelite knob is the through hole.
Yes, I agree.
Is that unanimous?
Yes.
Yeah.
You're all wrong.
Look at that. I knew it. Did you probably put an extra thing in there to make it sound like a through hole to throw it off.
No,
You're kidding me.
I even made sure. No, I even made sure I measured the diodes so they would have the same forward voltage. I used the same types of caps. I did everything. I even modded the through hole one so that the power filtering was the same as the surface mount, which because it was slightly different. So Yeah,
Interesting.
I knew it sounded better, and now I feel a lot better about my decision to make it.
Well, it is subtle, and I can definitely say that, like, if I had either one of these on my board, I would be a happy man. But when you're sitting there and you're trying to scrutinize something, and you're trying it on the neck pickup and the bridge pickup, and it's like it's kind of like smelling perfumes. At some point, you're like, I think I like this one better. But unanimously, we all did pick something else up just a little bit. So that was really fun. I really enjoyed doing that. That's awesome. That was cool. So thank you so much for allowing us to do that. Ladies and gentlemen, the last thing we just want to find out is from these two gentlemen, these two esteemed pedal builders in the pedal world of pedalness, what does the future hold, gentlemen? Mike, let's have you start, and we'll have Zach wrap up.
I think, as things are getting easier to program, there's a lot more gates into kind of the digital world. I think you're going to start seeing that from the builders. I mean, we already got a lot of other people doing, multiple, like reverse delays, the granular delays, all kinds of crazy sounds. So I think as the industry evolves, I think you're going to start seeing more complex sounds coming out of guitar pedals. And there's always going to be a market for that, overdrive, distortion, fuzz, there's always going to be that. But I think you're going to start seeing a lot of these builders kind of diving into the more complex sounds, even more than just reverb and delay itself. You're going to start seeing some crazy kind of stuff come, and it's pretty exciting.
Cool. Zach?
I think that we're going to see the boutique market kind of shift in a way. This is something, I thought we could talk about, but, the industry is kind of going hard left and right in a lot of ways, where some are embracing technology and moving to where they can do the complex things, and albeit for delays or whatever, or even overdrives, having a bunch of features and a lot of options. And then a lot of people are creating, the purest boutique hand-wired through-hole sort of stuff. And I think those sort of things, the boutique hand-wired, like really high-end things, are going to still be there. I think we're going to see the prices go up. But I think Mike's right. We're going to start seeing a lot more things that can do a whole lot more things. And another thing that I've noticed, and I think this trend's going to continue, we've seen it in guitars, we've seen it in amps, but I think the budget-friendly things are going to keep getting better. And us boutique guys are going to have to work harder to compete with the people who are making pedals that are $50, $75.
That's an interesting thing, because from a consumer standpoint and a pedal enthusiast and just being a musician, I don't think personally that you guys will ever have to compete with that. And I could be so far off the mark, it's ridiculous, and people are laughing at me right now. But they're just, I see them as two different things. Yes, it ultimately does come down to the sound and everything, but just for the same reason that there isn't one answer to that. It doesn't have to be just to the left or to the right. We need both, and there's room for both, and there's need for both. And even to the point of when you were talking about, there's always going to be an overdrive or something. Yeah. I just got another overdrive sent that I was thrilled about, right? And it doesn't mean that because I already have some overdrives that I can't get excited about a new one. There's always going to be little nuances to play on. And even if there's no nuances at all, it's from a brand that I like, or they did something cool with the graphics. It's a collectible at that point. So I think from a build standpoint and unique things that are coming forward, that will be exciting to see. And please, everybody who is out there listening and building, just because there are literally 8,294 overdrives, keep making them. We still want them.
Yeah. Yep. If it sounds good, I'll buy it.
You just bought one based on that. Yeah, at the show.
Yep.
So awesome. This has been a ton of fun, guys. I really appreciate you spending time sharing your insights from a different perspective that Tony and Jared and I don't necessarily have from the builder. But hopefully everybody out there dug it, and let us know what you think. All right. Big Jared.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it is time for another episode of Would You Rather. would you rather? It's going to be a tidbit related to what we've been talking about. And the last subject, actually. Second to the last. So, you want to have a pedal built by either Mr. Zach Broyles or our friend Mikey here. And
Zach's also our friend.
yeah, of course.
Qualifying.
Yeah.
It's his third time on. He's one of the guys.
Yeah.
So anyway, you want to have an awesome pedal built, and you don't know what to do, and you're like, well, should I do the surface or should I do the through hole? You know, I don't know what to do. So, would you rather surface or through hole board when you order your pedal? What are you going to do?
All right, so we have to pick one.
You have to pick one or the other.
And we're assuming that
One, either Mike
the
or
manufacturer-
Zach,
It
or
doesn't matter.
surface or through hole.
yeah, well,
Yeah.
we're just saying we're using them as an example,
Right.
But let's also assume that the manufacturer of this pedal, either Zach or Mike, or actually maybe they're collaborating on a pedal.
Yeah.
Let's say it's a pedal collaboration. They're
There we
not
go.
going to
Perfect.
say,
There we go.
I would suggest doing this. They're not going to say that.
You have to decide.
We have to decide.
That's right.
All
Okay.
right, I got it.
Mike, assuming that you were, well, just what would you do? What would you do?
No, that's not that we
Oh,
should.
they don't get to answer?
No, well, I guess they
that's
should.
right.
Yeah, they do.
Well,
Yeah, they
Let's
do.
let them go last.
Right, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, good.
All right, Tony.
Well, up until we revealed which of the pedals was a surface versus through hole, I would have said, the through hole would have been the way to go. But based on this pedal comparison here, I think I'm okay with surface mount, so I'm going that direction.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to go to the same way because the pedal I want built is very complex. And I know they won't have a problem with doing it on the surface mount. And I know it'll sound awesome. So
Okay.
I'm definitely going with surface.
All right.
I'm going to go through hole simply because if I'm requesting this directly from them and they're going to make one of it for me, then I want their grubby hands all over this
That's
thing.
a good point.
Mike.
Yeah, I think you really hit it. Am I making one or am I making multiple of these? Because I think that will make a difference. And also what Jared hit on, is it going to be complex or is it going to be simple? Yeah. You know, if I'm making multiple of these and it's going to be complex, I'm going to use smaller components so I can slam more onto this board. If I'm making one-off, overdrive fuzz, I'm going to, and I don't have a problem with through hole. But majority, I would use surface mount only because that's kind of what I've been using in my designs. And
Okay.
haven't found a flaw with it.
Solid. Zach.
If I was going to have someone make a pedal for me, even if they could do it well with surface mount, I would probably prefer through hole. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And then let's not forget our pal Lollygagger, who's still doing the turrets,
Turrets.
which
Oh, man.
are awesome. And, that's a whole
so
other
exhausting.
discussion.
Yeah, really.
There's not a whole lot of people doing that. So, I mean, that alone makes you go like, well, that's a thing. You should have that pedal simply because
The work
they're
put into it.
Yeah, the work put into it. And
Wooden case.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is awesome.
That wasn't necessarily a plug just for Sean or anything, but
it was.
It's a fact.
well,
Fact.
I mean, there's a couple people doing it that way,
Yep.
so I just want to call attention to we're not totally forgetting the turret fellas, and that's, I think when you do open a back of one of those and you see a turret board, you're like, whoa,
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
yeah. Anyway, so thank you for continuing to do that, turret boys. I don't know how else to qualify that.
Turret boys.
Tony, we got some peoples.
Oh, I know what you want me to do.
Yes.
At this part of the show, we like to thank a special group of people.
Who?
We call them our executive producers. Now, they've gone over to patreon.com/the guitar knobs, and they saw the various levels that they could participate as patrons of this phenomenal podcast known as the Guitar Knobs. And they decided they wanted to do the Cadillac. The Cadillac group, they get all these wonderful things like barefoot buttons and T-shirts and just stickers and picks and
all kinds of stuff.
and the satisfaction of knowing that they are supporting a podcast, a show, if you will.
Yes.
That they dearly love.
And at this point, we'll have known that there was a giveaway and that there's probably going to be more giveaways in the future.
Giveaways?
So that's one of the best ways to get that.
I love it. So, there's one other thing that the executive producers get. Mike, what happens?
No, they get to have their name right on the thing.
Whoa, what?
Yes.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I mean, that's awesome.
I mean, Jared would not relinquish that.
No.
No, that's my thing. We all know it.
So that's what I'm going to do right now.
Yeah.
So let's just this is a large group of people, and we really appreciate it. Even if we don't read your name, we appreciate you. Let's start with Doug Gann, Tim Nowak, John Esterly, Chris Heidel, Tig Harmon, Tyler Bray, John Anglin, Anthony Lathrop, Johnny Knowles, Stefan Lam, Rick Lenglou, Michael McVeigh, and the other Michael we like, Michael Senchuk, Brian Robison, Jonathan Jerusik, Ken Sayers, Corey Nigro, Brad Partridge, Michael Van Zant, Doug Christ, Darren Gregory, Chris Kearney, Sean S. John Daly, Martin Cliff, and Tom Brazen.
All right, you guys, thank you so much for your support. It means the world to us, and we encourage you, if you are thinking about it, just jump right into the Patreon group. You will not regret it. And again, we will hopefully be having more giveaways and stuff for the Patreon members, as well as, general population as well. So we're not going to just exclude everybody else. But that being said, Zach, where can people find you?
You can find me at mythospedals.com or on Instagram at mythospedals.
Awesome. Mike.
Instagram at Native Audio. And yeah.
Super. Tony.
Go over to pickguardian.com. If you want to see some of the things, the projects that I've been working on, go over to Instagram and Pick Guardian and the number 1.
Perfect. Jared.
BrandonWildPickups.com.
Excellent. Wow. The brevity. I love it. You can shoot me a note, an email, Todd at theguitarknobs.com. You can also direct message me on Instagram at guitarknobs on Instagram. And man, oh man, we're so grateful to Zach, and especially Zach for thinking of the idea here.
Yeah.
And for Mike for hanging out with us. Everybody out there, have a fantastic guitar week. Zach, we'll see you at some point, right?
Yes. Maybe next time I'll just fly up there.
I love it. I love it. Everybody else, subscribe! What the hell?
Hold on. Let me get my cat out of here. She's like bumping the desk. No.
The one that I use
That's just because I moisturize.
dang it, I always forget this damn name of this pedal. Well, hold on.
Anything
I
Mythos.
can't edit that. That's crazy
Okay.
pants. The
Yeah.
the what's it the
Don't put Mike on the
That was
spot.
perfect.
son of a. This is a highly complex episode, you guys. Bee sting.
We can go back to the future.
It's Champion Lucky pedal. It's
It's the one we both have.
yeah.
It's
No,
not
it's
just
not
you.
the fat get either. It's not the divvy. Hang on.
I love that pedal.
Yeah.
Or would you rather use a top load board? That's not going to work.
So
The pedal boost.
I'm jumping in as if none of this ever happened. Well, that's it for these knobs. Please visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/theguitarknobs. Visit our website at theguitarknobs.com for all of our past episodes, 4 on the Floor blog, and other good stuff. You can connect with us on social too at our Facebook page and share your gear and stories on our Facebook group. Also, be sure to check out our Instagram at Guitar Knobs. Catch you next time.